legacy. How do you do that? And that's where the Medici family really for me is a role model, is an example.
For me, when I think of legacy, I think it can become very fast something ego-driven or something that is very selfish. So I want that you start speaking into that, because I know that's not at all what you mean.
But politics is, what is the good of the city? What is the good of the country? How are you in getting involved in society?
Welcome to Get Your House in Order, where the Medici brothers, investors and entrepreneurs, Chris Auditore and Dr. Philip Zimmermann, discuss timeless principles of success, significance and legacy. A podcast for business owners who want to design a beautiful life and a beautiful business. Sponsored by the one and only exclusive Medici community.
Welcome back to Get Your House in Order, where we talk about how to create a beautiful life and a beautiful business. Chris, we have a question as our topic today, a question that you actually ask in quite a few talks that you give, because it's an important question for you. So before you answer the question, because I want to know basically how you would answer the question, but what sparked this question? So the question and the topic is, what's your 500-year plan? What's your 500-year plan? So where did that question come from?
Well, here's where I ask it. So I speak on the topic of legacy. That is my favorite passion subject, is because that's where we are at as a family. We're thinking about how do we set up ourselves for legacy. I'm trying to figure that out, and so I've went on this whole quest. That's where this whole Medici community kind of burst forth, and that's why I'm writing books on the topic of legacy creation. But I'm also speaking on the topic. So a couple of weeks ago, I spoke in front of 2,000 people, and I end my talk with the question, "What's your 500-year plan?" And then always everyone laughs, and then I said, "Hey, you didn't do your homework before you showed up here." Obviously, no one has a 500-year plan. Well, and that's the problem. No one thinks long term. We live in a culture that is about instant gratification, instant success. You get online. Also, all business coaching is always quick fix. How do you become rich? How to become a millionaire tomorrow? Everything is short-term thinking, and so I want to counterbalance that and say, I don't care about your short-term success or not. The question is, how are you setting yourself up for the long run with yourself, your family, and your business? So that is the legacy question, and I think this is what we need to discuss.
So how, and we can hear the passion in the voice.
This is where I get more passionate than any other topic at the moment.
So tie it to the Medicis, because I know that you studying, especially Cosimo de' Medici, kind of sparked that whole question on legacy. Take us into that journey. How did you discover, especially the aspect of legacy when you looked at Cosimo?
Well, it's very simple. They have a legacy. I fly around the world and mention the Medici family, and everyone knows the Medici family. Like in Europe, if you studied
European, you paid attention in school.
If you paid attention, yeah, some people didn't. That's why I have to educate. But no, the Medici family is known all over the world. And if you don't know the Medici family, you know Leonardo da Vinci, you know Michelangelo, you know Donatello, you know the most famous artists of the Renaissance period. Well, they're all tied to the Medici family, because the Medici family was the patrons of these artists. So you know about them. So the question is, this was a family. Cosimo de' Medici lived 600 years ago. We still know about the stuff that they created and that they've built. In fact, 16 million people per year visit Florence on average basis. And they go there to study and look at the stuff that the Medici family created. So obviously this family has created a legacy. And so when I started studying, trying to figure out for my own family, I've got 3 sons, I'm trying to figure that out for our companies and our setup, and for our wealth. How do we steward all this? And then how do we set it up for the long term? Now, I'm trained as a lawyer, so my law brain is all about how, and corporate law is how do you structure companies? How do you set up a foundation? How do you set up a business? What do you need to put in the statutes, for exit? And if things go wrong, how do you set this up? This is the questions that you think through as you develop, companies' structures and taxes. How do you structure your taxes? How do you balance it all off? So these are the questions I'm used to. Now, legacy. how do you do that? And that's where the Medici family really for me is a role model, is an example. I've studied them not just for the good stuff but also for the bad stuff, and this is what I want to I want to apply long-term thinking to my life.
Well, I thought I was getting an A on this, but now you putting it a little bit in perspective, because I actually a few years ago wrote my eulogy. My eulogy, basically what I want to be read on my funeral and at my funeral. And I spent a few months actually writing it, and I kind of revise it every year a little bit, because my life changes, my priority, my values, or my also some of the goals or what I want to be known for. I adapted slightly, but every day for at least a few years, and now I would say 2 or 3 times a week, I actually read through my eulogy and get the picture of who do I want to become and be remembered by and be known for, and for it to be true at the end of my life, that if it is read, my kids are not going to roll their eyes and go like, yeah, that's not true.
I don't know the guy.
Who is that? Are we at the is he still alive? Because this is not who we know. But it gives me real kind of, you know, in philosophy terms we call it the telos, the goal. We have something we can kind of orient ourselves towards, so that we know that we basically are going into the right direction. And with any goal setting, it's more about, you know, setting the goal that we are getting into motion and into movement, and then adjusting along the way, setting different goals, even with something as our eulogy. Now, how would you say, you know, what kind of thinking questions, what kind of long-term ideas or practices or tactics would you say are helpful in not just creating a eulogy, but creating a 500-year kind of a legacy plan?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is that it's not just about money. Now, because we're business people, and you know, our audience is entrepreneurs, business owners, you know, we all have read lots of books and have gone to lots of seminars and business school to kind of how to create successful companies and make money, which is, I think, a very important aspect of legacy creation, is actually the stewardship of money. So we can talk about money, but let me just say it very bluntly. If it does not go beyond money, there is no legacy. Because in world history, there have been a lot of very, 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 very wealthy people who had a lot of money, and they absolutely did not leave any kind of legacy. So, and that's why I love the term. Yes, it has something to do with money. But it also has something to do with our values. It has something to do with our family. It has something to do with our vision. It has something to do with our philanthropy. It has something to do with impact we want to create in the world. It has something to do with our faith. It has something to do with our belief system. So that's why I love this whole topic. It's more multifaceted, and you need to think about these different areas of your life, and what is your kind of your aim, your telos, where are you kind of working, what are you working towards in these different areas?
So how do you practically do that? Or what would you say from, you know, studying Cosimo would be ways where you feel like, oh yes, this really actually, these strategic decisions in the present actually
create a legacy.
Or at least have the potential to create a legacy, because we are not gonna say, oh, it's gonna happen, but basically it's a goal, it's a dream.
Yeah. So I mean, I have this conversation on a weekly basis, because people ask me, Chris, you know, so how do you create a legacy? And so I'm today in the podcast, I'm going to reveal my short answer after, you know, not just having read lots of books and about it, and having had lots of conversations and studying lots of successful people, but I'm going to give it in kind of the nuggets out here. First, diversification. So I believe the reason the Medici family created a legacy is because they created a successful business. They had a cash flow positive business, pumping money. Yes, that was great. They dedicated time towards it. But then they diversified into the other spheres of influence. Now let's talk about that. The second one is politics. They strategically went into politics. Now, we can talk more about what that meant back then and what that may perhaps mean today, but politics is the realm of the public interest. Okay, so it's not just about what are you voting for, which party do you sign up for, but politics is what is the good of the city, what is the good of the country, how are you getting involved in society and making your influence known there. Then it is about art. I cannot not discuss art, and I've become a student of art. I'm studying art history. I'm going to museums. I'm going to galleries. I'm talking to artists. We're sponsoring artists. We're doing all. But there is something about the realm of art that you need to get involved in. The next one is architecture. The Medici family, built all kinds of palazzos, buildings, churches, cathedrals that we still visit today. That is so much part of the legacy that they left behind. So we need to talk about physical objects. Okay, art may also, is also something physical, but architecture, it's actually about creating something physical in the world that you leave behind, that people can go and look at and visit. So what are you doing in that space? And the last one is religion. The Medici family worked themselves into the Catholic Church. They actually had 4 popes that came out of their family tree, and so obviously they were involved in the realm of faith and mission and church and religion. And so spirituality, a very intangible aspect. Lots of business people are like, what does have religion or spirituality have to do with my life? Well, it has a lot to do if you want to create a legacy. If you don't have a spiritual dimension that you're developing, if you're not working yourself into kind of the immaterial world, then you won't have a legacy. Very, very, very simply put.
So one aspect you didn't say it in a particular way, but it actually is kind of connected to all 4. That when I read the book, but also when I studied the Medici family and we kind of looked at it in Florence together, was not so much that you have to be in all of these places, but that you actually are influencing people and investing yourself into people who are in all of these places, that are creating some of that impact or that legacy or that creation. One chapter in the book is find your Donatello.
Choose your Donatello.
Choose your Donatello. So you choose somebody you want to invest into. So Cosimo was famous for investing into artists, sponsoring them, really kind of mentoring them. Not just financially, but actually through giving your values, your experience, but also your network, all of them into people. So I think when we talk about legacy, we first of all should not put aside of who we are becoming in pursuit of that legacy. So I think that is a very important piece, that who you are becoming in your actually pursuing a legacy is as important as the legacy you are creating, because we have examples in history where all of a sudden you want to create a legacy, your own legacy, but you did not become the person actually in the pursuit of that. And number 2 is who are you actually taking along, who will even create a greater legacy through what they are creating and through the influence they are having, because you invested into them, because you mentored them, because you took them along, which I think becomes kind of the ninja game of real legacy. And what I hear from Cosimo de' Medici, all the great artists that you mentioned, they are much more known as Cosimo. But Cosimo was actually the one who helped them and gave them the platform and gave them the support to do that.
It's a good point.
And so for me, when I think of legacy, I think it can become very fast something ego-driven or something that is very selfish. So I want that you start speaking into that, because I know that's not at all what you mean. But when I look at people who want to create, a legacy, it's normally I look at them and then go like, oh, that doesn't sit right. Something is off, because the person that they they are is not really resonating at the value level, and now they know that they will die, and so now I need to kind of create, you know, we have all the kings and dictators in the world who want to create a legacy. Speak to that.
So yeah, let's talk about a definition. So what's the definition of legacy? And I get this question all the time, and I always say, guys, I'm just raising the topic. I'm not the expert on legacy, which I really want to say out here, even as we're doing a podcast around this. I'm not an expert on this topic. I'm a student of this topic, and I just think it's so important that we all need to, engage more in this, and that's why, I'm putting this out there. But let's talk about a definition. Remember, Philip, at the last Medici gathering, you did an interview with John, who, kind of gave us a quote. And as he gave the quote, everyone's like, so I don't know where the quote came from, but I put it to John that you interviewed, and so he said, an inheritance is something you leave to people. A legacy is something you leave in people. Just think about this.
Say that again, a little bit slower.
A little bit slower. An inheritance is something you leave to people. A legacy is something you leave in people. So, inheritance. I, for many years, have been in lots of conversations with wealthy families around the topic, how do you pass on your wealth to the next generation? And you set up foundations. We've set up 2 family foundations, and I've been helping a lot of families kind of in this process, because philanthropy is so much on our mind. So it's all about, how do you structure it, for the next generation, that your kids are not being messed up with money. So there are legal structures, tax structures that you need to come up with. That is all in the realm of structuring the tangible, the physical assets. And that's what we call an inheritance. And in most countries there's an inheritance tax because the government has figured out you can make some money off people dying, and so let's and then people try to avoid that. And so how do you structure that? So a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, they are very much aware that they need to structure their inheritance. What do you do with your company shares if you die? What happens to your wealth when you pass away? So we spend a lot of time, energy, and money on getting consultants to help us on the inheritance piece. Okay, there's a whole industry that is making money over that. Okay, that's very important. Now, I would say today, legacy is a whole lot more and deeper. Yes, it involves structuring your physical assets for the next generation. But on the other side, the question is, what are you leaving in people? So let's talk about values. What kind of values are you instilling as the patriarch of your family? I mean, Cosimo de' Medici was a patriarch. Every business owner is a patriarch because you have your kingdom, you have your reign. It's your employees, it's your business, it's your money, it's your family. So you are a patriarch. Well, so what are your values that you are putting into your business? What are your values you're putting into your family? What are the values you're putting into your kids? And that actually can last longer. I was just a few months ago with our grandfather, and one of the beautiful things he has done is he's written down his life's story. By now he's over 90 years old, and he's had an incredible, rich and beautiful life. We talk about in the Medici community a lot about creating beautiful life. I would say our grandfather, very multifaceted, had a beautiful life. And obviously we don't just know the public persona of his life, we also know kind of the private life and the family life, and so we have great admiration for him. And he has written a number of books, and these books are also a way to transmit the values. Our grandfather is a person of faith, he can't. We cannot have a family meeting without him getting up and addressing the family and kind of talking about his values and his faith and what it means for him to be a child of God, and what he feels like is a responsibility, in the world, on how we love our neighbors and how we care for those who are less fortunate than us. And so I would say that, perhaps we get some money somewhere along the line, also inherited, but, which has not happened in our family yet. Our parents are alive, our grandparents are alive. So, but we can definitely say they've passed on some values to us, which legacy creation demands passing on your values.
So what would you say are some values that you feel like you want to pass on into your kids, that are not just kind of the Instagram quote values, where you would say, no, this is maybe a little bit more particular to us. I heard from Mark Zuckerberg one time when he talked about how to create values for a company, and he talked about how at Meta, basically a value is only something that it has to be very unique. If it's just oh, we are nice, we are we are client service, customer oriented, or we are excellent in what we're doing, all these values that companies have, where you go like, so that's a given. That needs to be a given if you are in business today. So a value has to be something where people would go like, oh, this is very different from this company to this company, because this is really what they are valuing. And it also says, by saying yes to this, you might say no to this. So what would be values that either you and your family, or even in some of the conversations with some people that you had, talking about legacy, and not just transmitting or giving wealth into the next generation, but really giving guidance, giving kind of wisdom, giving direction through values? What would be examples?
One of the crucial decisions that we have made as a family is that we move from ownership to stewardship. This is, for me, a major shift within my own thinking and within the way I want to create and leave a legacy. Let's talk about ownership. As an entrepreneur, you want to create your own setup. You want to create your own company. You don't want to have a boss. You want to have your own products. You want to have your employees. You want to you create your own. I always say kingdom. You want because we're all little kings of our own kingdom. So we work very, very hard to own stuff. We want to own buildings. We want to own companies. We want to own land. This is we work on ownership. And we take responsibility for that. Now, for me, there's a very crucial point where at some point you need to move over to stewardship, where you say, you know what, I'm not just the owner of all this stuff that I've created. I'm a steward. And a steward has a completely different mindset. And that's why it has been such a change in my own perception and in my own thing. A steward thinks about how do I not just reap the benefits of that, but how do I preserve that in a way that it is beneficial for the future. A lot of business guys never make that shift. And that's what I think I need to work on also with my kids. So, let's talk about what do we do with the kids. A lot of kids out of affluent families, they're waiting for the payday. They're waiting for the parents to die or grandparents to die so that they get money, and then they have lots of money on their bank account. Well, this is not going to happen in our family. And I've told my boys, this is not happening, because we're structuring our assets for stewardship. Now, stewardship means that they will be the ones who are also administrating the wealth that has been created. and that's why we've structured things in family foundations, and that's why even new things that we're creating and putting, it's all under the umbrella of stewardship. It's not under the umbrella of ownership. That means we have to teach them principles of good administration, good investment, sowing seeds for the long run. And having good structures that support that, where also it takes away the rights and also the fight. And so, I can't tell you how many stories I know of where people, kids have inherited something, and then there is this big dispute over the testament. How is the verse to be interpreted? How's the evaluation of the company, of the building? How's that even fair? One needs to pay out the other, and then there's big families are breaking apart left and right over money. And I would say it is because there's a wrong understanding of ownership versus stewardship. And that's where I'm very strategic within our family setup, that we're saying, hey, the wealth that we have is something for us to be stewarded, not for us something to be owned. And so we need to learn on how to be good stewards.
Well, that really ties it back to the whole theme of legacy not being an ego game and an ego-driven kind of pursuit of just having my statue up somewhere, and basically people just kind of making me the attention of basically that legacy. It's really the question of how can the legacy be created that more people can flourish, how more beauty and more joy and more justice basically can be created through some of the things that maybe we have done and we have basically invested in.
Well, so let me finish off on talking about art, because I think art is such an overlooked realm in business. I know so many business guys who, if I start talking to them about art and investing into art and enjoying art and building a collection, and they really don't know why. And here's how I would put it: is art creates beauty in this world, and artists create beauty. And so think about, the Medici family, whether you've heard about them in school or not, probably up to this point, unless you're part of our community, they haven't really, changed much of your life. But think about how many people have been inspired by going into churches or going into museums and looking at the incredible art that has been created, Renaissance art, 18th century French art, 19th century British art, modern art, and how much joy and life this has brought to people over the generations. And so, for me in legacy creation, that's why I've become a student of this whole realm of art. And again, I'm not an expert. In fact, we have lots of people within our community who are much more versed about this topic. You've already built great collections. We have some incredible art collectors as part of the Medici community, invested millions and millions into wonderful art. I'm learning about this, but because art outlives you. And it outlives your family and can be handed down and can bring joy and color to this world. And so that's why I think it's a vital piece of creating a legacy.
So that was the topic of legacy. What's your 500-year plan? And I think as you're thinking about this today, just ask yourself, number one, who do you want to become? What are your values? What do you want people to say about you at your funeral? I think that's a good start, but then also to kind of ask yourself, okay, what are the values that you want to install into your family, into your company, into your kingdom, and how can you move from basically being the boss to being the one who stewards your family, your influence, your money, your company, your power maybe, and then really kind of think through what if you could have a kind of a wish or a want that comes true, what in 500 years, what kind of a legacy, could you maybe create through some of the effort you're putting into the next decades of and years of your life. Thanks for watching, and we'll have another exciting episode here soon.